That's the situation, but military action is not likely to be an option. With us is James Denselow, who's worked in the country as an expert on politics and security in the region. James, we're seeing the images because of people taking film. I mean, these are ordinary citizens watching what's happening. What have you made of what you've seen so far, the scale particularly, the most recent incidents in Hama?
Well, it's a really worrying uptick in the violence that has racked the country for now 5 months, and I think we may see a revolutionary Ramadan in the country. They're using large-scale armour and snipers against urban areas, which will see hundreds of people killed so far, if the reports are to be believed. And there's no real sign of this finishing anytime soon, really, and that's what I think has characterised events in Syria. Every time the government has offered both carrots and sticks, the scale and the scope of protests around the country has increased. It's not just Hama, it's also in Denselow, down in Abu Kamal near the Iraq border. We've heard stories now of troops defecting, whether it's in as large numbers as it will have to be for there to be some form of critical momentum. It may be that at the end of Ramadan we find ourselves with some form of low-level civil war in Syria.
Well, yes, talk me through the significance of Ramadan now. I mean, you're suggesting that that's an opportunity where people will get together and possibly there could be some united movement. Is that the significance?
Well, I mean, previously we've seen the biggest protests being held on Fridays after Friday prayer, so there has been, because the Syrian state has never really allowed an effective and independent opposition, there has been use of mosque as a place of political space. So I think Ramadan perhaps is an opportunity for the opposition to perhaps coalesce somewhat and challenge the regime more effectively, which is why, of course, the regime has responded by launching this attack on Hama, a place that had been kind of running itself the last month.
Now, you know the country well, and the last time you were there, how long ago?
About 2 years ago.
At which point you were, along with a lot of other people, forced to leave?
Well, I mean, Syria has always been a harder place for international journalists and researchers to work, and I think that's one of the problems we face today, is that we don't really know what's going on because the Syrian government isn't letting people in to see. So, of course, now what we're facing is a battle of the YouTube clips. Who's to be believed? You know, how can we tell exactly what's going on? Ultimately, what we're seeing coming out of Hama is pretty grim stuff.
Is there a kind of a clear wish of the people at this point? Does what they actually do want, and do they know what they want, or they just don't want what they've got now?
I think you're right. I think ultimately people seem to be far more cohesive on what they don't want, which is the Assad regime. You have to remember that on paper he's offered a huge amount of concessions over the last few months. Getting rid of the emergency law, getting rid of the parliament, offering new electoral laws with parties, media law, giving civil rights to some Kurds, giving some concessions to the Sunni majority. Yet this isn't really to be believed, because ultimately he's been in charge of the country for 10 years and his father's been in charge of the country for another 30 on top of that. And nothing has yet happened, and so it's a question of intent and trust. And I don't think the Syrian people feel that he's got the legitimacy to do these reforms, or certainly his family will allow them to happen.
And do you see parallels with what's happened in other countries, in Libya, in Egypt, as to what might happen next? Or are there key differences about the nature of Syria, or the regime, or the people?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. The Arab Spring has had common underlying principles that is causing the momentum to go throughout the whole region. However, each country has its unique and own kind of circumstance. In Syria, as I say, the key would be whether the security forces stay loyal. Because ultimately, if you look at Egypt and Tunisia, the places where the revolutions have proceeded, it's because the elite security forces have abandoned the regimes they were defending. That is the key to whether things will happen dramatically in Syria. Otherwise, we may have a Libya or a Yemen situation, some form of civil conflict.
Okay, we'll leave it there. James Denselow, writer on Middle East politics. Thank you very much.